Okay, I'm going to go ahead then. Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Lockwood, Chair of the Washington County Planning Commission. Today is April 19th, 2023, and this evening's meeting of the Planning Commission is called to order. Clerk Aguilar, may we have the roll call, please?
Chair Lockwood, my name is Emily. I'm sitting in for Susan tonight. I'm
thank you. All right.
In the clerk role.
All right.
Roll call. Do we have Commissioner Fry? Not yet. Commissioner Havner?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Kaiser? I think he was going to log out and log back on.
He is back, but he may not have voice command.
Here.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay, Commissioner Milliman?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Mori Badu?
Present.
And Commissioner Podar, I understand will be joining us later this evening. So next we have Commissioner Will.
Present.
And Vice Chair Dye.
Present, and I'd like to take this time to announce my recent promotion to panelist.
Thank you. And Chair Lockwood.
Present.
Thank you. It looks like we have 7 commissioners present and a quorum.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's proceed to the director's report, please.
Thank you, Chair Lockwood. My name is Erin Wardell. I am the Planning and Development Services Manager here at Washington County, and I have tonight's director's report. Welcome to our April 19th Planning Commission meeting. A friendly reminder that we do need a quorum in order to take action items such as approving minutes and also approving any of our ordinances or making formal recommendations. And so being on time for these meetings is pretty important. It causes a little bit of kerfuffle when we're trying to determine if we have a quorum or not. So friendly reminder, we'll be starting on time. And as Chair Lockwood said at the beginning, best practice to start right at 6:30 when the meetings are scheduled to start. I have a happy announcement this evening, which is that Diami Valentine has been promoted to Principal Transportation Planner. So replacing me in that role. I'm really happy to have that position filled, and Diami's here this evening. He'll be talking through the transportation related items in our work program. Diami's been with our department since 2006, so he really knows his way around and really excited to be working with him in that role. So you will be seeing him quite a bit more in the future. Another exciting announcement, we have an online open house available right now for our Council Creek Regional Trail project. I believe that was shared with you previously. So if that's a project you're interested in, please comment on the online open house and share it widely. We have a work session tonight, 2 work sessions tonight for our meeting. We will be doing a briefing on our draft fiscal year 23-25 planning work program. And then we will have a presentation from staff from our Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. For our upcoming meetings, we do have a scheduled meeting for May 3rd. We don't have any items for that meeting at this time, and so staff do recommend that we cancel that meeting. For the May 17th evening meeting, we have some work session items. We will be doing an overview of the 2023 Oregon legislative session, which I think will be of interest to everyone. We'll be doing an update on the climate-friendly and equitable communities state planning rules and our plan for implementation. And we will be, we'll have another opportunity to review the work program because at that time you'll have had an opportunity to review the staff report. So with that, I am done with the director's report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there questions or comments for Ms. Wardell? All right, I don't see any, so let's proceed. Public communication. Emily, has anybody, Mr. Roberts, please go ahead.
Thank you. Not exactly a member of the public, but thought I'd take an opportunity, and I'm going to not be able to stay on for very long. I need to go pick up my daughter, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for serving on the Planning Commission. We had the volunteer appreciation event last week, and I don't know if anyone was there, but I wasn't able to connect, I know. And oh, good, thank you. And just appreciate, want to just let everybody know we definitely appreciate your service on the Planning Commission and the work that you're doing with our community, for our community, and just express that appreciation. So thank you all, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming by and saying that.
Thank you. And it's Wear Orange Day, Work Zone Awareness.
It's actually why a lot of staff are wearing orange.
Yeah. And congratulations on your promotion, Blake. Thanks.
Are there any other members of the public who want to speak to us in the public communication? Ms. Brown, is there a list or?
Chair Lockwood, no one has signed up for public communication.
All right.
Would anyone in attendance like to communicate with the commission? Don't see no hands. We can move on.
All right. Thank you. Work sessions. I believe our first work session tonight, we've changed the order of the presentations to make sure that Commissioner Podar she notified us that she probably couldn't be here right at 6:30. So we're changing the order of presentations. The draft fiscal year 2023-2025 planning work program. Is that you, Ms. Cherniak?
I will actually be leading that, and then Teresa and Diami will be participating in that as well.
Okay, thank you.
And here's our slides. Okay, so we are going to be giving you an overview of our draft 23-25 work program this evening. We'll be sharing the context and organization of our work program, discussing our priorities, giving a quick overview of requests received, and then covering next steps. You did not receive the staff report for this in your packet this evening because we just shared it with the board on Tuesday. So for your next meeting, we will make sure that you have the staff report as well. So you'll be able to review the items more in depth before our next conversation. But tonight is an opportunity for you to have an overview and ask any questions that come to mind. Next slide, please. So land use and transportation's planning work is carried out by 3 different planning teams. We have community planning, which is led by Teresa. Community planning's primary responsibility is maintaining and updating the land use elements of the county's comprehensive plan. We then have transportation planning, which is primarily responsible for maintaining and updating the transportation elements of the comprehensive plan. Most of the projects and work that we do eventually lead to ordinances that amend our comprehensive plan documents. And so it's sort of shorthand to say that our responsibility is maintaining and updating those plans, but most of the work that we do ultimately does end up there. And then once the work is in the plans, it is implemented by our current planning or development review team. And so the development review team reviews development proposals to make sure that they meet all of our applicable county comprehensive plan and state requirements. They also provide general development assistance to the community. So those 3 teams make up our Washington County Planning Department. Next slide. We use a work program in order to identify and prioritize the work of our planning staff. The work program helps us to identify our needs, and it also helps us to schedule items, particularly things like ordinances that need to go through our full planning process, come to your planning commission, and then eventually go to the board. The work program includes our mandatory tasks. Those are generally things we are required to do by state and local policies. It includes ordinances, which you will eventually see and make recommendations on. We also prepare issue papers that oftentimes lead to bigger projects and then ultimately to ordinances. And we do a lot of studies and special projects as well. The work program attempts to balance our available staff and budget resources, our ongoing routine non-discretionary tasks, things that we are required to do by different regulations, prior input and guidance from the board, and that includes the board's budget priorities, and then community inputs and requests that fit into all of those other items that we're trying to balance. Next slide. So what's new this year? Some of you have been with us for previous work programs, and so you may notice that some things are different. For the rest of you, this is all brand new. One of the first things that's new this year is that we are now doing a biennial work program. In the past, we did this annually. Doing this on a 2-year basis is a better reflection of how long these projects and processes actually take to work through our systems. They also, I think, the 2-year framework is going to allow us to more efficiently allocate our staff resources, and preparing the work program is quite a bit of work in and of itself. And so I think a biennial schedule is going to fit in a lot better with the way that we need to be able to run our processes. We're also implementing an equity framework for all of our proposed planning projects. This is based on the equity framework that we developed as a part of the Major Street Transportation Improvement Funding Allocation and our House Bill 2001 Middle Housing Community Engagement. We contracted with a consultant, Espousal Strategies, to develop that for us. It included an equity framework, an equity index, and a model community engagement plan. And so we'll be able to utilize that work going forward in all of our planning projects. We also, for the first time this year, are including all 3 of our planning teams in the work program. In previous years, we branded it as the long range planning work program, and we really primarily focused on the work of community and transportation planning, but including all 3 teams is really a better reflection of all of the work that we do. We are organizing our work program around themes. I think these themes make it easier to communicate policy direction and goals to the community and align with board direction. We will be preparing an online open house to make this information more accessible and to be kind of a general educational tool about planning at Washington County and the types of projects that we're doing. So that will be available in both English and Spanish, and it'll be available for a month. We also are only including 2 tiers of project priorities this year. And again, if you haven't seen the work program before, you won't know what this means necessarily, but in previous work programs, we had tier 1, which were priority items we would be working on, tier 2, which were things we would work on if we had capacity to do that, and then tier 3, which were also things we'd like to work on if we had capacity to do that. This year, for ease of communication, we have tier 1, which will be our priority items, and tier 2. So tier 2 is things that we would like to be able to get to if we had staff or financial capacity to do those items. So it just makes it a little bit easier to organize. So those are all the things that are new this year. Next slide. So I wanted to go over some highlights of completed tasks, and many of you were a part of these tasks in these projects that we did. And so I talked a little bit about the equity framework that we did as a part of previous projects. That was developed, I think, 2 years ago as a part of that work. And then we had, those projects were ongoing for a number of years, of course. We also adopted ordinances implementing HB 2001 and Senate Bill 458, the middle housing state legislation. And those were adopted through 3 different ordinances. We made updates to our transportation system plan to include implementing outcomes from the Tualatin Valley Trail Concept Plan, the Urban Reserves Transportation Study, the Cooper Mountain Transportation Study, and the Tonkin Area Employment Plan. That was ordinance number 881. We adopted our urban planning area agreement with the city of Tigard, ordinance 879. We also did minor comprehensive plan and code amendments through ordinances 877 and 889, and then we applied FD20 plan designation to areas that were brought into the regional urban growth boundary in 2018, and that was ordinance 865. So this is a really high-level overview of some of the major ordinances and project work, but we had a lot of other work that's been completed in the last couple of years. Next slide. So as I said, our tasks are organized by relative priority into 2 tiers. So tier 1 are the highest priority items. Those are projects we intend to actively work on in the next 2 years. Tier 2 are items that are also important, but at this time we have insufficient staff resources or we don't have enough funding to actually undertake the project. So that work could be initiated in the next work program or sooner if resources are identified. Our proposed themes for this work program are housing, natural resources and climate, multimodal transportation system planning and funding, and then plan and code updates. Next slide. So I'm going to turn over the presentation to Teresa at this time, and Teresa is going to first talk about our ongoing work and then talk about the land use themes.
Great, thanks, Erin. So for the record, Teresa Cherniak, Principal Planner with Community Planning. So if you look at our work program table, and if you look at the work that we do on an ongoing basis, a vast majority of our work rests here. All of what current planning does is in this section. So review of development applications, code enforcement, answering questions at the front counter, that sort of thing. That's all in our non-discretionary work. We also do a lot of things like plan amendments, transportation modeling, our mapping, staffing the Planning Commission and the Washington County Coordinating Committee. All of that is in this this ongoing work. We also do a lot of work with local, state, regional, and federal agencies, working with cities on their planning for new urban growth boundary areas. We serve on metro committees. One of those right now is looking closely at the regional transportation plan. A lot of major transportation projects are regional and they affect the county, and so we participate on all those committees. This also includes our work on urban planning area agreements, and the Planning Commission does see those. So while the specific projects may change in here, it's still a lot of work, a lot of the work that we do. Next slide. So the housing theme, this is the start of the discussion of the themes. So this is in addition to the non-discretionary tasks that I mentioned. The work program includes other projects that fit into the county's overall goals and meet state and local requirements. So Erin mentioned the themes earlier. The first one is housing. And I know this has been a big focus of the Planning Commission, and you'll be happy, I think, to see that this is one of the major themes that we have. It's a topic that's been at the forefront of local, regional, and state discussions for some time now. The governor and this state legislature has really focused on it. Several bills have already passed, and there are others that are being considered. So this first task is really addressing housing production and affordability through, in large part, addressing the housing-related legislative changes that are coming through, that came through last year and that will be happening this year. This will include housing needs analysis, the Oregon housing needs analysis, and coordinating on that at the regional level. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this. Also on the assisting in housing production and affordability is for us to look at our community development code. We've called it an audit. That caused a little bit of confusion on what exactly we meant by an audit. It's really an assessment. So an assessment of our community development code, the structure and function of it, looking for ways to simplify and streamline it, reducing barriers to housing development. We'd also be making sure we're consistent with state and regional requirements. You've heard about clear and objective standards. We're going to do a review to see if there are other places maybe where the standards aren't clear and objective. We'll also be including the Planning Commission and a number of stakeholders when we do this to identify maybe things that you've seen that could be simplified in the code. And finally, in the rural area, there have been some changes at the state level to allow accessory dwelling units in the rural area, and some other things that are actually being considered right now at the legislature to address rural housing options. So we're planning to do an issue paper on what those possibilities are. and bring that forward. We'll bring that to the Planning Commission as well as the board to get some direction on whether or not to move forward with some of those. The changes at the state level were, for the most part, permissive, meaning we don't have to make the changes, but we can choose to. And so we see that there are some benefits to some of them, and we'd like to bring that forward for discussion. And next slide, please. Natural resources and climate change. You've also seen some on this, the significant natural resources regulations you've been hearing about. We'll be briefing you again in June, and there'll be a technical advisory committee that a couple of planning commissioners will serve on. So that's looking at changes to our regulations in response to appeals and remand of our natural resource regulations a year ago. We are working with a consultant on that, and it'll be about an 18-month process. So expect to see probably next May that we would have the regulations, but you'll be briefed at least 3 or 4 times between now and then on the work as it progresses. And the other item, you also got a briefing on it, maybe the last meeting, the climate friendly and equitable communities implementation. That those were rules that were adopted at the state level in July of last year. And they require us to make a number of changes to our planning regulations, focused at this point really on parking. And some of those requirements actually are already in effect. We have requested an extension to the timeline for implementing the next set of regulations. And the state is looking at some changes to those rules. So we're not sure exactly what will be required over time of us, but we know that there are requirements that will be needing to meet, and those also will be coming to the Planning Commission. Next slide. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dyami.
Great, thanks, Teresa. Good evening, I'm Dyami Valentine. I'm the Principal Transportation Planner at for the department now, and happy to be with you this evening. Thanks for the opportunity here to share this work plan. So I'm going to share the multimodal transportation planning elements with you. First off, it's been about 10 years since we last updated our transportation system plan in any substantial manner, and considering regional state policy changes and guidance, now is a good time to start thinking about scoping for the next major update. So we anticipate doing that over the next biennium, and having touch points with your commission as well as the board, and also engaging the community as we're thinking about priorities and goals for that effort, keeping in mind kind of the engagement that we've been doing over the last couple of years as it relates to the transportation system. The next item we have is updating the county road design and construction standards. This will be in close partnership with our engineering section. And really the focus here is continuing the work that has already happened. I'm not sure, I believe you've probably been briefed on this effort previously, but it had to essentially be paused due to COVID, the pandemic, as well as staffing shortages. But this effort is really focused on better aligning the standards with our existing and aspirational land use context, and updating kind of best management practices. The next item we have is the develop the transportation element of the county capital improvement plan. this is just supporting the work that has been occurring to help identify transportation priorities for future funding opportunities that the board will take into consideration. And we've been doing a lot of this work to help identify that, working with the community and our stakeholders and partners throughout the county to evaluate and prioritize those project opportunities. Next slide, please. So continuing the multimodal transportation planning, we have a couple targeted grant-funded projects. Farmington Road Concept Plan is a project that's funded through the Transportation and Growth Management Grant Program that's administered by the Oregon Department of Transportation. And so in partnership with them, we're looking at developing a concept, kind of a preferred design option for Farmington Road for this segment. That's what we kind of refer to as orphaned, a highway that has is owned by ODOT, but hasn't received much attention. So between Kinman Road and 198, so we'd be looking at an improved design option, as well as developing a framework for potentially transferring that to county ownership. And then the next grant-funded project there is updating our Transportation Safety Action Plan. This is a federally funded project. It is in direct partnership with Metro, as well as the city of Tigard. Sought a grant for this effort through the Safe Streets for All grant program. And so we will be working with those partners, as well as engaging cities and our communities to think about and prioritize ways to address safety issues in a coordinated fashion throughout the county. And then there are just ongoing kind of transportation system plan updates. This item specifically reflects work that has come before you, the ordinance 882, as well as potentially some other minor amendments that may come up over the next 2 years. Next slide. And then we also have transit planning that we are now a public transportation service provider as designated by the state. So we are a direct recipient of statewide transportation improvement funds. And so we help administer that program. And part of the eligibility requirements for that is to develop a transit development plan, which was adopted, first time adopted a couple of years ago, has to be updated to reflect priorities for the upcoming biennium in terms of what projects will be funded through that fund. And so we have to do regular work to administer that program, as well as we're in the middle of doing a countywide transit study in partnership with TriMet, Metro, ODOT, and Washington County cities, really thinking about the needs and opportunities and developing a vision for how transit can better serve our communities. And so we will be wrapping that up just at the beginning of this period of the work plan, but thinking about how we may implement some of those strategies coming out of that effort. And then we also are involved in doing planning and coordination on regional trails. We're most active right now in managing a project development of the Council Creek Regional Trail, which is funded through construction. And so we'll be handing that project off to our capital projects team here in the next year or so for them to deliver the project. And then we also work with other partners on some of these other regionally significant trails in the county to help advance and support early project development work of those trails. I think with that, I will turn it back to Teresa.
Thanks, Diami. If we could go to the next slide. So finally, one of the important themes in our work is updating the comprehensive plan, including the development code. There are likely going to be 3 ordinances this year or this biennium on urban growth boundary expansions and urban planning area agreements. So there is an approved expansion of the EGB by Tigard in the River Terrace area, and then North Plains is proposing EGB expansion for their city. There also is a likely EGB expansion ordinance will do for the recently approved semiconductor Senate Bill 4 areas that will be by the governor will be brought into the urban growth boundary. We're not sure exactly the areas or exactly when that will happen. So our hope is that by the time we bring forward the final work program in July, we will have a better idea of the work needed for that and can reflect that in the work program. Excuse me. We also always have a minor comprehensive plan amendment ordinance that is kind of a grab bag of possible changes that we might get from state law or metro decisions if current planning identifies issues that they're experiencing with the code, we bring that forward. And then finally, there are 2 issue papers that we're recommending working on. One is about contractors' establishments, primarily in future development areas. And there have been some issues with code enforcement and city concerns about contractor establishments in their future areas. So we'll look at issue papers. Some of you may be familiar with, but they're where there's a topic that we're not sure which direction to go on. So this gives us the ability to explore it further, to look at the background more, to look at the options, to lay those out in an issue paper, and to bring those forward to the public and the Planning Commission. So contractors' establishments is one of them, and the other one is re-looking at the interim parks system development charge that we have for the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District. This is an SDC that we charge in areas that are in the ultimate service area of the THPRD, but not yet within the district. And so the charge here was developed in 2004. And that's almost 20 years ago. The program has never been reviewed. And so the idea here is to do a review of it and make some changes probably for how to update that. Next slide, please. So each year we do receive requests to add items to the work program. Over the past couple of years, we have received some, and we'll expect to receive more through the public review period. So I've listed the ones on this slide that we've received. And we do discuss these in the staff report that we will send out. The board did authorize us to do that, so we will be sending that out. We'll send hard copies to the Planning Commission as well as a link. So some of these we have recommended be included in the work program. The first one, amending the height limit in industrial districts, has mostly been an issue recently for semiconductor related businesses that have some towers that are above what the height limits are. So we have included that in the minor amendments ordinance. Rural accessory dwelling units, we are recommending that for the issue paper. On significant natural resources, that is an ongoing topic that we have, and we do have, we've heard a lot from members of the public. We expect a lot more through that process. So we'll be addressing as much as we can through that. Going back up to rural tourism, that is on tier 2, and we're recommending that stay there. We have added the sidewalk fee in lieu program as a tier 2 item as well for possible future work. That did come up during our work on the middle housing ordinance and how to get sidewalks built. So this is something that we'll be exploring as we can in the future. We aren't recommending further work on the other requests. So that includes the gas station siting requirements, the dog training on rural resource lands, neighborhood meeting rules, and the 1% for the arts program, and then urbanization planning for the Peter Court properties in North Bethany. And the one I'll talk about a little bit is the gas station siting requirements. We did receive a lot of letters on this. It was primarily in response to a specific gas station proposal, and there were concerns that it was close to a wetland and concerns with possible environmental impacts from that. So the request was to look at our regulations and prohibit new gas stations within 1,500 feet of certain public uses and sensitive environmental resources. And that one at this time, we're not recommending. We did do some preliminary review and found that that request would effectively not allow any gas stations because of where all of those properties and resources are, that it would effectively not allow any gas stations in the urban unincorporated area. We didn't find any other Oregon jurisdictions that had any regulations like that. And gas stations are actually a very uncommon request. So this, the gas station that just went through was the only one we've had in the last 10 years. So we're not seeing it as something that that is common and that would warrant at this time to do a lot of work on developing regulations for. So with the next slide. Next steps, we did just talk with the board yesterday, and they directed us to distribute the draft for a 6-week public review period. So as I said, we'll be sending out that staff report that provides a lot more information. We'll send that out to the Planning Commission and to everyone that's on our pretty big mailing list for interest in the work program. Typically we have a 1-month comment period. We are extending that to be a 6-week period to allow more time. And then since you haven't, all you know about this is what we just talked about tonight. You don't have the staff report. We are planning to come back in a month at your May meeting, the middle of May meeting, to get your feedback on it. And then the board will consider the final work program adoption in July. So with that, I think that's the last slide. So we're happy to take any comments or questions that you have.
Commissioners, comments and questions? Commissioner Will. You're muted.
Unmute, yeah. I just had a simple question. I think at the beginning of the presentation, it talked about the transportation system plan. It's been like 10 years. And it needs to be reviewed or updated. And then in the middle of the presentation, there was some comment about some minor updates to the transportation system plan. Could the staff just elaborate again on, if I understood it right, there's going to be a full review of the transportation system plan and perhaps a replacement one adopted, and that will take time? Is that what's happening?
So we do minor transportation system plan amendments on about an annual basis or every other year, just depending on when we need to add something to the plan. But those changes tend to be relatively minor in scope, or they're just to be consistent with another adopted plan. What we're talking about for the scoping exercise is for a major TSP update, and that would effectively replace our current TSP with an entirely new document that reflects our community's values and our board's values at this time, it would take us probably 3 years to get through a full transportation system plan update. It's a major undertaking with significant community engagement and technical analysis. So this is just proposing the scoping of that, and then it will take us a number of years to actually get through the whole project.
Okay, so we'll be around for the beginning of it. Some of us might be around for longer. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Havner.
Yeah, just a couple of comments and questions, I guess. More SDCs by THPRD doesn't equate to affordable housing in my book. And I wonder when we look at that, SDCs are only available to certain governmental agencies for the improvement of infrastructure. There's a number of agencies like public safety that have to wait for taxes to catch up. And I don't know as SDCs is the most effective tool for improving an ultimate area of THPRD for affordable housing. The other comment I had, and this is more of an observation and not a question, is when we give ultimate authority to the governor to enhance UGB areas for semiconductor facilities, I'm sure there's going to be a question about who pays for the infrastructure that supports that. Is it the developer? Is it the agency? Is it going to get tagged on to taxpayers and how we manage those new UGBs or passed on to the city or agency having authority once those are enacted? So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And I was going to ask a couple questions about equity framework, but I think we'll probably get beat up with that in the next section. That's it.
Any other comments? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Wardell. Yeah.
I was going to let Teresa, if she wants to. Do you want to?
No, you probably were going to say the same thing, so you go ahead.
Okay. We'll find out if we were going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I was just going to clarify that we don't control THPRD and we don't control their SDCs. They're their own entity. However, because THPRD assesses those SDCs upon new development, when the county is the permitting agency for that, we assess the TDT for them and then we pass it through to them. So we have this kind of unusual situation where there's areas that are not within THPRD's current boundary, but they're within their future boundary area. And they haven't annexed into the THPRD boundary. And so we assess an SDC on those properties, but it's not the full SDC that other properties would pay towards the THPRD service district. So, and it hasn't been reevaluated in, was it 20 years, Teresa? It's been a long time since we actually looked at it. So it's a really small number. So while you are correct that adding SDCs certainly increases the cost of, doing the business and building the development, it is something that we need to work with our partners on. And if THPRD does want to increase that SDC on those properties, it's a conversation we need to have with them because it's their SDC and they kind of decide what to do with it. And there's some complication with, we have to pass that money back through to them. And so there's some more work to be done, but you'll see the issue paper about that and learn a little bit more about it through that work.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure I'll have more comments then too.
And on Senate Bill 4, yes, we have the exact same concerns about infrastructure. So if these things are going to suddenly come into the urban growth boundary and create a lot of strain on our system, we would like funding to be able to pay for those things. And so it's a conversation the county will be having as we go through the next couple of months and figure out what that legislation actually means for us. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, I can see it requiring another 48-inch water line to support all of the new UGB area, and who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, and a lot of transportation improvements as well.
Other comments and questions? I had a question kind of early in the presentation. Ms. Wardell, I think it was in your section, that there's an equity component in all planning projects. I was wondering what's the scope, what's included, what's under the definition planning project?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, so we tend to think of our projects as the discrete line items that we talked through in those slides are generally how I would group many of the projects that we work on. And so the equity framework, equity index, and model community engagement plan that we developed as a part of the previous work with our consultant support is a fairly flexible tool that we can update and reevaluate as we need to on a project specific basis. So for example, significant natural resources is a project that's happening right now, will eventually lead to an ordinance. As a part of that work, we're developing a community engagement plan. And so we're looking at the equity framework, determining if the equity index mapping is at all useful for that particular project or how it can be updated to be useful, and then thinking about how our community engagement plan that we develop can be responsive to those two things. So it's a body of work that we do now as a part of all of our projects to make sure that we're meeting our overall equity and engagement goals.
Okay, so equity equates to engagement? I mean, or are there other factors?
It's a part of how we do our engagements, right? We want to make sure that we're always doing equitable community engagement. And that's a really good segue into our next work session topic, right? Because we'll be hearing more about county policies around doing equitable community engagement. Okay. So it's more than just engagement. It's really about the project itself and the outcomes that you're getting out of the project and how it ultimately impacts our community.
Okay. Thank you. And later in the presentation, when Mr. Valentine was speaking about different projects, again, that word, one of them was the Complete Streets Design Update. There were quite a few different. Anyway, I was wondering, how likely is the Planning Commission to be updated on? I mean, there's a whole lot of different transportation related things you're working on. And if we aren't updated, is there a way we can keep up with what you're doing?
I think all those projects will come through the Planning Commission at some point when they're ready to be reviewed. So yes, all transportation projects come through the Planning Commission as well.
It just seemed like there was a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you may recall, I think that we did a briefing on the Complete Streets Design Update.
I do remember that
2 years ago at this point. It was a little while ago. And so we were talking about different design standards for roads and how we could better accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists in our road design. And so we did most of the background technical work. And so we've talked about now, how do we actually go through and finish implementing it? And we've had some pretty significant staffing shortages at the county, and staffing shortages on our engineering team really impacted our ability to get that project over the finish line because they need to draw their design standards and they didn't have staff to do that. So once that is ready to bring forward, we're hoping sometime in the fall, but it could be later than that, again, depending on engineering staffing, we'll bring that back. So the Planning Commission will have another chance to see it.
Okay, and is that true also for the transit study, that we would be hearing about that?
We can actually schedule a briefing on the transit study at any point. I'm looking at Diami on the screen here. We've been doing a round of engagement around the transit study. We just went to we're going to the board on Tuesday. We went to the county coordinating committee on Monday.
Okay.
So that could be a future agenda topic. We can get that scheduled.
Okay, good. Commissioner Podar.
For accommodating my request for late arrival. Erin, I had a question. I'm glad that Chair Lockwood brought up, like, what does that equity component look like? What is that? Is it built in? I think we usually use the words countywide that says we are keeping an equity lens. We're working with equity. One, we can only attempt to, but whether it is an equitable practice or not, the person at the receiving end of it is going to determine whether they were treated equitably or whether they were heard, whether they were seen. So we can only use tools to try and work with within an equity framework at all points of time without an equity lens, more like a framework. But however, it would be really helpful if we started, like when we're talking about projects or any engagement, community engagement and all, if we can establish what those goals are. So we are working with equity goals, but what did that goal look like for this project or for this effort or for this engagement? And did it go through all the way? And who are the people who are deciding even that information? Who are the people who made those decisions that these are our equity goals? Because yes, we are going to address community, but if somebody doesn't understand the community, then what do they know that they are working with an equity lens, right? So it's only going to be their mindset that's going and that claim that I worked with an equity mindset. But if the people who are impacted are not on the decision-making table, who are not engaging, participating in the process, then again, it's the person who is, who are those decision makers, who are deciding the goals? What does that look like? So if we can define what the goals in moving forward, if we can start defining the goals and the process, it would what are those? It would help a lot and so that we can, those of us who are doing equity practitioner work, we can say that this is where it's missing, and we can start filling those gaps so that moving forward, we can keep, it's painful. Equity work, working within that framework is painful because we are used to just getting it done. We are trying to meet deadlines. But if we keep pushing it and we keep pushing it, we will get to a place where we can actually, the community will feel that they are being treated in an equitable manner, and the results will show that. Did that make sense? Right?
Thank you.
Or I can reframe it.
No, thank you. I think that's really, really good commentary on that. And you're right, it's really hard to do the work, and it's really iterative in the work because it's not just a rubber stamp that works every time. It's something that you have to continuously evaluate. And again, really good segue for our next topic.
Any other comments or questions about the work program? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so thank you, all three of you, very much. And our next item on the agenda is that presentation from the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement.
And we have our speakers here. It looks like they are being promoted into panelist room. So we'll just wait one moment for them to come over. Amanda made it. Okay, it looks like Latricia made it too. So welcome Amanda and Latricia, and give them an introduction before they get started. So Latricia Tillman is Washington County's Chief Equity Officer. She is our first Chief Equity Officer. This position was created, I believe in 2020 as part of the county developing the equity resolution. And then Amanda Garcia Snell is Washington County's Community Engagement Manager. And so with that, I will hand it over to them.
Okay, thank you, Erin, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you today. I'm going to go ahead and lead off the presentation, and then about halfway through, I'll pass it over to Amanda. But what we wanted to do is basically give you an overview of Washington County's equity resolution and the work that we're doing in the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement to bring that resolution to life. And as Sushmita mentioned, it is definitely a journey. It's definitely iterative. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a change process. We'll talk a little bit about all of that as we go forward. But it is a fairly high level presentation just because it takes a long time to talk about everything that we do. And so we welcome questions, interruptions. If you'd like to just ask questions before we move on to the next slide, that's definitely welcome. So don't feel like you have to hold your questions to the very end. Okay, so next slide. Can everybody see that okay? Just checking. Okay, so our county equity resolution did a lot of things. It covered a lot of ground. It acknowledged that there is a long history of racial discrimination in Washington County, in the state of Oregon, and the nation. So shining a light on the impact of inequity and oppression in Washington County is a really courageous thing to do. And the things that we're grappling with here are not unique to Washington County, but it's very unique to really face it head on. The resolution also celebrated Washington County's diversity and rich cultural life. We are either the most diverse county. I like to say we're the most diverse county, but we're one of the most diverse counties, definitely with the largest Latino population, largest Asian population as well, and a significant representation of immigrants and refugees from all over the world in Washington County. We have significant language diversity as well. And all of that brings quite a bit of diversity of life experience, of expertise, et cetera, that we want to really celebrate and engage. The resolution also guides the county's long-term efforts to advance racial equity and create a more inclusive community. So we recognize that this is not something that will be fixed tomorrow or even in the next year. We are clearly operating with within a framework of generations of oppression and racism and inequity. And so it definitely takes time to dismantle that and then to re-envision the future and that we want and to work towards recreating that. It does commit us to developing our understanding of the inequities that county policies, programs, and practices may cause, have caused. And so that's kind of that slowing down to really understand how things that feel really normal and natural to local government may actually be causing harm. They may seem very neutral, but may actually be causing harm in community. And so we want to make sure that we have that opportunity to slow down, to pause, to really interrogate our practices and make sure that we're not causing harm, but also looking at ways to improve our practice. And then I think very importantly, it commits us to act with humility and openness. So to recognize while we didn't necessarily cause the inequity that has been in our county for hundreds of years since, you know, the dawn of the settlers in Oregon, we do have a responsibility. We own our responsibility for creating a better Washington County, a better Oregon for everyone. And that means learning and listening. Okay, next slide, please. So just wanted to speak a little bit about terminology. I've worked in multiple jurisdictions doing equity work for over 20 years, and I have heard people for a long time talk about diversity and inclusion. And then somewhere along the line, people started talking about equity, and they just kind of slapped it into the middle of the acronym. So they would say DEI, we do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, but don't really think about like, what does that mean? And why do we say those words in that order? And so we've been really thoughtful about that. So diversity is really about the different identities and cultures that are represented in our workforce, in our community, on the commission. But it's really more of a quantity. It's a quantification of that difference in any kind of organizational body. But inclusion is really about the quality of participation. So does everybody feel welcome on the commission? Does everybody feel welcome in our Washington County workforce? That's one thing, feeling welcome. Do people have access to power? Do they have access to decision making? Oftentimes in workplaces, you see a lot of diversity at the front line, but less diversity at the leadership level. So that's not really an inclusive environment if really the diversity is just your frontline workers and there's not diversity in your decision makers and the people who are charged with thinking and strategic planning and assigning budgets. So inclusion really looks at kind of that power sharing, but also at doing things differently. So there are different ways that different communities make decisions. There are different ways that different communities consider options, right? So it doesn't always have to be a Robert's Rules of Order kind of process. Many communities are more consensus driven than like a up or down majority rules kind of vote. So that's an example of, you know, things to consider when you're thinking about inclusion. As government workers, our we work in service to the community. So we're really about a focus on equity, which is about outcomes, justice. It's about how do we ensure those equitable outcomes. That requires looking at the data. It requires understanding where there are gaps in outcomes to our services, gaps in the quality of our services, and gaps in the results of those services. And that also requires a focus on justice. So dismantling kind of historical practices that have been a barrier to equity. Next slide. So in Washington County, we lead with equity. We focus on equity. So while diversity is about representation of the ways that we're different, and inclusion, as I mentioned, is access to decision-making, information, opportunity, as public servants, our job is to make sure that the whole community has the opportunity to thrive. And what that looks like when we're talking about racial equity is when that's happening, we won't be able to predict outcomes by race and ethnicity. And right now that's not true. We take a holistic approach. So we're thinking about community engagement, as was mentioned, equitable community engagement, but also looking at the data, as I mentioned, so that we can understand who has access to transportation, who has access to natural areas, who's living closer to waste transfer stations or brownfields, et cetera. Like all of that is quantifiable. But we also want to look at policies, programs, procedures, and kind of, as I mentioned, interrogate, do those programs, policies, procedures, et cetera, do they advance equity, or are they taking us backward or keeping us in a place of inequity? And so we also try and look at root causes, so asking why. So if there are situations that we're trying to address, just continuing to probe and ask why those situations exist. So it means interrogating history, interrogating decisions, and interrogating, as Commissioner Podar mentioned, like who was at the table. So all of these questions help us kind of understand what are the dynamics of any kind of decision or practice that can either help us move towards equity or keep us stuck in inequity.
So I do see a hand up. So Commissioner Podar, I think, has a comment or question.
Yes, please. Thank you, Latricia. Latricia, you just mentioned this word that Washington County is working with equity. That's a false statement. That's an actual false statement, because we are not. We use the words, it may impact community. It is impacting community. But when I feel that we continue to live in this culture of denial where we say that we are doing something, but we are not. I'll give you a small example, transportation. We are a transit desert county. For 700,000 people, transportation is not equitable. Existence of transportation is not the reality, because we are not a connected community. Can anybody reach North Plains at any point of time with public transport? For the longest time, having lived in this county for 22 years, I did not know that there's a city called Gaston and Banks. Nobody can get there. Nobody from Hillsborough can get to Sherwood or to West Lynn or to Lake Oswego. So how are we working with equity when people from one part of the county can't even get to another part because there is no transportation, nothing that the government has done to ensure that there is at least one mode of public transportation available to people. It doesn't exist. And even when we did community outreach, I believe Dami was there on that call when we were doing the biennium. Dami, please correct me with that word, transportation plan, and the community engagement numbers had been shared. 180 people, either it is 108 or 180 people gave feedback. That's 0.00 something % of the county, 0.00. So that's not equity. So when I hear Washington County even say that they're working with equity, we have a 5-year wait for Section 8 housing voucher. Is that equity when people can't have access to housing, when people are constantly living in the fear, when we have hunger in the county, people are houseless in our county, we do not have access to equitable education. We know that Black and brown communities are disproportionately impacted by the sheriff and the police in our county. They are arrested at alarming records, and their identities are hidden under, they've been categorized as white. And so how is that equity? So I feel that if we say that we are working with equity, then it must have something to back up. I would love to know those examples, because at this moment, as a civic leader, as a community leader, as somebody who works with different committees and all across the board in all jurisdictions, I feel that that's a wrong statement to even say. And I would love to know some examples. That would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I share your frustration. We are 3 years in to having even an equity focus and directive of the board. 2.5 years in to having staff focused on equity. So we're at the very early stages of the work, and yet we still do focus on equity. We haven't achieved equity, that's for sure. We are, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. When I started, I made some assumptions about things that were in place that just weren't in place. And so we are, I talked early on about laying a foundation. We're not even necessarily laying a foundation right now. We're digging out the ground to be able to lay a foundation. So I agree, like it's baby steps. We are, and yet we still have a focus on equity. So that is our North Star. That is where we're trying to go. That's where we're trying to lead. But I hear you. And there's, a question just about urgency and resource, et cetera. And we are an under-resourced team, and we don't adopt the budget. We don't work at our own direction. We work at the direction of the board. So there is definitely a push-pull around what exactly we're able to do, how fast, with how much resource. So I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. Okay, but so we still do focus on equity. We are trying to move toward outcomes. I will also just say we are not a county that's very practiced at using the data to determine what are the outcomes that we're trying to invest in. When you look at our budget process, you'll see budget is really about dollars in and dollars out. We don't talk about outcomes. So that is a big, significant culture shift that we're trying to help support the county moving in that direction, so that we can know, like, are we actually making a difference? Are we approaching equity? Next slide. So as I mentioned, 3 years ago when the office was established, there were certain responsibilities that were given to the office, such as managing implementation of the county's equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies, as well as community engagement strategies, establishing an internal equity leadership council, an external advisory council on racial equity, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategic plan for Washington County, and a focus on workforce pipeline and supplier diversity. I'll just share relative to those comments that you made, Commissioner Podar. I was not willing to even call what we delivered to the board a strategic plan for equity, diversity, and inclusion, because we were asked to turn that around in less than a year. And to me, when you're thinking about community engagement, a strategic plan requires data. Like we didn't have what it took. So as a jurisdiction. And so what we were able to deliver was a strategic action plan that's really, as I said before, in the past, I talked about we're building a foundation, but now I'm saying we're digging up the earth like removing some of the historical bad stuff, to actually be able to lay a foundation. So I was not able to deliver a strategic plan for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Next slide, please. So our team included the entire community engagement team, which already existed for Washington County. And again, comments about the level of community engagement. Our community engagement team for a 600,000 people county is 5 people. So yeah, there's definitely limitations and challenges there. And we are working with departments across the county to help support them in their work to do more community engagement. We're also staffing up to help support civil rights compliance. And when I talk about we're digging out the ground to start laying a foundation, that's a direct reference to our work on civil rights compliance. Civil rights law was passed in 1964. We're developing policy now, 2023, almost 60 years later. So we're working on that. We're doing equity policy development. So we're building out equity tools. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but equity tools for budget and legislation. We also have a supplier diversity strategy and are working more on equity data analysis. So those are the positions that we were able to hire. You'll notice what's not there is a trainer. So in a county that has a lot to learn about equity, diversity, and inclusion, we don't have training staff capacity right now. So hopefully we'll be able to build that out in the future. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, some of the initial focus areas for our office include just building that foundation of civil rights compliance. So Title VI policy is client civil rights focused. So making sure that there's language access support for people with limited English, interpretation, translation, understanding the difference between an interpreter, a translator, understanding the role difference between an interpreter, a translator, and a bilingual staff person. This is where we're starting right now with Washington County. We're building out standard discrimination harassment procedures. So for clients to be able to complain if they feel like they've experienced discrimination or harassment, or employees if they feel like they've experienced discrimination or harassment on the job. We need to build out those standardized procedures. As I mentioned, we developed a budget equity tool, and that is intended to help every department in Washington County start to think about their budget, their budgeting process, their budget decisions with more of an equity lens. So thinking about who's at the table creating budget, what data are they looking at to understand what inequities exist within their access to services, quality of services, and outcomes of services? And then how are they investing to address those in culturally specific services, culturally responsive services, as well as in the professional development of their staff, so that all staff can be more conversant, more competent at building equity into the basic everyday work of each program and department. We developed a legislative equity tool that's currently guiding how our lobbyists in Salem are thinking through bills, understanding, analysis of bills that are coming forward, whether we support it or not, understanding the impact of different pieces of legislation, et cetera. We're currently updating our bilingual pay policy, which basically hadn't been updated since it was established. I can't remember how many years ago. But that's also intended to help clarify the difference between bilingual staff, interpreters and translators, as well as think about some other things like, are bilingual staff overworked? Is their caseload the same as monolingual staff, but they are having to spend more time explaining our governmental systems to clients? And so is that really fair to have everybody have the same caseload. When you're trying to explain our systems to people, it takes twice as long. Our bilingual staff getting access to training or to promotional opportunities, or are they being held back because programs don't want to lose that bilingual skill in the program, even if it's for an hour to go to a training, let alone a promotion. So we're working on that. And then we're also working on our community engagement, leadership, and capacity building. And, you know, these are not things where you can just flip a switch and the practice changes. We're doing a lot of work to help people feel more comfortable with really stepping back from the ways that we've always done things, so that we can make room for different community members to engage, to ask different questions, to have those questions responded to in a way that's affirming of those questions. And even if we didn't think of those questions, that doesn't mean it's not a really valid question. So there's a lot of work that goes into kind of preparing our organization to be able to engage with a more diverse Washington County than we have in the past. Right, next slide. I did just want to spend a little bit of time on our discrimination, harassment, free workplace policy. So we just want to make sure that all boards and commissions are aware of this policy, that we are not tolerant of discrimination or harassment or retaliation, and we're building out procedures for investigating and responding to that, and that policy applies to employees, to elected officials, to interns, to contractors and volunteers. So starting to build that out as well. We've started doing all staff training in support of that policy, a different training for managers and supervisors than for staff who don't have a supervisory role, so that everybody understands from their perspective what their responsibilities are. So that's really important to us.
I see a hand up. Commissioner Will.
I have a question. This graphic, is this the actual document with the real dates?
Yes, it is.
Yes, I was not a planning commissioner during this time, but I think it's interesting to point out that Washington County made this action in January, which was early in the year, prior to some other jurisdictions across the nation's focus on these issues later in the year. So I think that's commendable. You know,
well, I would say yes, it's commendable, and this is implementing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to make up for the entire nation's failure to do anything for decades. I just want to say that I'm glad that we did it early in the year, is not as a knee-jerk reaction. So I want to point that out. That's good.
Commissioner Podar.
If I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
If I could I just want to respond, just as someone who has been in HR for a number of years. These workplace discrimination, harassment, sexual assault, retaliation policies are normally on the books in many jurisdictions, and they get updated during certain cycles. So, you know, in my previous organization, it was something we basically did every few years. So this is not something that would normally fall into what was happening in terms of the racial justice conversations. This is a very different document in terms of dealing with how employees interact between themselves and the public. And it's something that's been around for decades. So I didn't want to conflate the two things as we move the conversation along.
Yeah, it's very different. And I'll just say that, again, this is tied to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which required government who receive federal funds to establish policies and procedures to dismantle systems of discrimination, harassment, sexual assault, retaliation, et cetera. This has been a long journey for governmental jurisdictions across the board. Clearly, We are still as a society dealing with things like sexual harassment in the workplace, discrimination, harassment, etc. Jurisdictions that receive even $1 of federal funds have to attest, so state, that they are compliant with civil rights law. And so for me, when I see that this was adopted in 2020, I wonder what happened between 1964 and 2020 in Washington County. So what was the policy then? Did we have one? It seems like maybe we didn't. Go ahead.
Commissioner Potter.
Thank you. I also want to, I need to emphasize this. And words are only words until it's a mindset. So that's just a document. It has no substance to it unless it's actually implemented. It becomes a mindset of the people in the space. So this commission itself, despite this being updated in 2020, was witness to a racist bias attack on a sitting planning commissioner. And that threw off a whole county-wide reckoning of how we are going to address harassment, racism, bias, what the kind of questions that we ask people. In fact, the person who committed the bias incident and the racist attack was honored by the Land Use Commission with a certificate and acknowledgement for their service, while the DEI office was in place. So it's important, our history can never be forgotten, that these are documents and they are just documents, they're just words, but they have no substance to it. We still do not have any place. If somebody gets harassed, there is no supportive system to allow them to rest, to heal. There is no compensations, there is no support system. Reporting something that has happened doesn't mean that the person who's gotten harmed has the support to be able to heal and to move forward. So people continue to get harmed and live with their own traumas because do we have therapy sessions for people? No, we don't. So this commission itself, despite that document, I just wanted to emphasize that we continue to witness attacks and harassment and trauma. And in fact, people have to live with it if they want to continue to serve and they want to continue to hold their jobs across the county. And in fact, even amongst communities, civic leaders, community organizers. So I wanted to bring that history in, because if we forget it, if we don't remind ourselves that these things happen, then we can't move forward, and we'll continue to think, oh yes, everything is hunky-dory. So I'm glad Commissioner Will brought that statement, so that we can talk about it and bring that yes, it's just a document, and no, we are nowhere even close to implementing what the document says. But we just took one step.
Thank you. And the way that I refer to this is the necessary work that has to happen in order to get even to a conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Without addressing those issues of intolerance, bad behavior that are related to all manner of protected class status, it doesn't matter how much we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we've got to get there. Next slide. So if you want to learn more about the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, I just wanted to make sure you had access to our website. It has information about our land acknowledgement statement. I want to appreciate again Commissioner Podar for your encouragement that Washington County should have a land acknowledgement statement. You were one voice of several to continue to move that forward. This is just a screenshot, so there's a lot more on our website. We also have a language access statement that's focused on making sure that we do provide services in a manner so that our diverse community can access them. Next slide, please. And then if you click on that, learn more about equity, diversity, and inclusion, you can actually read the language of the equity resolution and then see that strategic action plan. It's not a strategic plan, as well as the quarterly updates that we provide to the board. And again, with appreciation for all the comments and feedback, just want to say we are still very early on a journey. And it's going to take a lot more work and a lot of partnership. And so we do appreciate the encouragement, the advocacy, the push forward to continue this work. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda Garcia-Snell to talk about community engagement.
Thanks, Latricia. You can move to the next slide. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Garcia-Snell, and as Latricia mentioned, I'm the Community Engagement Manager in the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. So keeping with the policy theme, I wanted to start with the Equitable Community Engagement Policy, and then I'll talk a little bit more about other things that community engagement does in the county. So the Equitable Community Engagement Policy is something that the board adopted last fall. Excuse me. That policy includes several elements related to best practices. Those elements are listed on the slide. I won't read through this full list, but I will highlight that we begin with a Washington County Community Engagement Spectrum, which is a tool to help with transparency of engagement and to tailor approaches accordingly. And so the spectrum is really a document that helps staff identify, to what degree are they engaging community? Are they just looking to inform them about something that's a decision that's already been made, or are there more opportunities for them to impact the decision making? And just being really clear with that, with community at the beginning of that process, so that people know what the expectations are, and then we're also being really transparent about what a processes are. So then we also have throughout our policy really focused on being sure to include the communities that that people are trying to connect with in every phase. So in the planning of an engagement process, and then in the implementation of that process as well. And then we also want to focus on inclusivity and reducing barriers to participation, like language access and including stipends and honorariums. So we are in the process of developing procedures to help staff with the implementation of this policy. There's a committee, an internal committee that's working on that. And we do, but with the passage of this policy, there are opportunities for stipends and honorariums and for complying with some of these other elements as well. So more to come on the procedures. I think hopefully that will help these processes, especially with the stipends and honorariums, be a little less burdensome as we get that, that piece hammered out a little more. Oh, I see a hand.
Commissioner Morabito.
Thank you. And thank you for this presentation. I was just wondering if you could go in a little bit to how community members are recruited to the committees, and if there are community members on them, or is it composed of Washington County staff only?
So committees, I need a little help. What do you mean by committees? Like the advisory boards and commissions of the county, or?
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll talk a little bit more about the county's advisory boards and commissions, but just to answer your question, typically staff are not members of the advisory boards and commissions unless they're there representing themselves as a citizen or as a community member in Washington who lives in Washington County. Primarily, the county's 36 advisory boards and commissions advise the Board of County Commissioners and are appointed members that are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. And it's a range of community members and people who represent specific industries in Washington County, or lived experience, or consumers, depending on the focus of the board and commission. And I'll go a little bit more. I have a couple slides on the diversity and inclusion aspects of the boards and commissions, because it is a big piece of our.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious about the recruitment process and how widely it's advertised and by what means.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to touch on that.
Commissioner Porter.
We can, I'll come back to it later.
Okay.
I am really loving where Commissioner Moribunda is going.
Okay, so next slide. So some of the other focus areas of community engagement. It's always a challenge to separate community engagement activities because they're so intertwined into the equity and inclusion work of our office. But just to be able to think about it a little bit easier, we separate some of these things out. And so with the adoption of the equity resolution, the board created an internal equity leadership council, and which identified several focus areas and that have staff committees that are working on specific focus areas. So one of those areas is boards and commissions diversity and inclusion best practices. And as I mentioned, I have a few more slides on that I'll touch on in a second. And I will speak to the recruitment of in those boards and commissions as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time for this slide on that, but some of the other things that we do include contracting with culturally specific and responsive community-based organizations to provide civic leadership training and support historically excluded communities in participating in decision-making that may impact them and their communities. And we have been contracting, we contracted with Adelante Mujeres for 5 years, beginning in 2017 for this program. And more recently, we've been able to expand through some of our, with the use of some of our American Rescue Plan Act dollars to expand civic leadership training. So now we have contracted with Unite Oregon and also with Apano to help us administer or to provide that training throughout the county. And then we continue to contract with Adelante Mujeres. And so people who go through this training, we encourage them to participate in community participation organizations or the Committee for Community Involvement. And we also really encourage them to apply for boards and commissions. The county's advisory boards and commissions, it's one of our recruitment ways in which we recruit for those. And you have a civic leader alum in your midst serving on the Planning Commission. And so we're very proud of this program, and we love to see when civic leaders are, have opportunities to participate on things. Some folks go on to run for elected office and serve on advisory boards and commissions for other jurisdictions.
Commissioner Porter. You're muted.
You're muted, Sush.
Thanks. I don't know whoever had made that decision to allow that civic leadership program to happen. They didn't know what kind of a storm they were going to rake up, but maybe they did one thing good. However, I would like to say that there are 92 civic leaders that have graduated from the program. Less than 5 are civically engaged actively, less than 5, because we do not value and honor and respect their time. So we do not make sure that every barrier, be it internet, be it childcare, be it stipends, be it food, that have been taken care of. Even after completing the civic leadership program, people are supposed to go through extensive processes in order to be able to apply for boards and commissions. And so it's not a direct channel. So yes, we have put people through training to learn about government and I remember going through that training. We did not address systemic inequities. We did not address racism. We did not address what the current situations and circumstances look like. None of those issues were addressed. That came so much later, listening to people across the board, nothing to do with Washington County. This was from listening to people across the country and across Multnomah County, going through those trainings and all. So yes, our civic leader trainings are extremely important for people to understand what a government system and structure is about, but it doesn't do the necessary job of necessarily making people feel fired up to serve because of the barriers that we have not addressed. stipends are not just those things. They are, if one person in the room is getting paid, everybody else should get paid, because this is expert advice. We cannot just pick up somebody on their free time. It's a commitment that's required. They have to learn and educate themselves about their community, about intersectionality of communities, about diverse communities, be in community, to be able to represent. Think about it, 9 of us are representing 700,000 people. But if we are not we have no connections to those communities, if we do not understand why this community works with this community differently and what are all of those puzzle pieces, we are not doing an equitable job, even serving on the Planning Commission. Because we have no clue what 700,000 people's lived experience is like. How do they connect to this land? Do they feel at home? Do they continue to feel harm and trauma? Do they have access to resources? We don't know, because we don't have the resources supporting us to be able to bring community voices to this table. So all of us who are here have massive amounts of privilege, massive amounts of access. And we also have the privilege of not necessarily, those questions were not asked. What do you know about the diversity of your communities? What do you know about the intersectionality? Those questions were not asked in the interview when I interviewed for this board. So yes, we have a civic leader program. It's an awesome program, but does it have the soul that we need to create amazing civic leaders? No, because that will require very hard conversations. But one of the biggest inequities that committees continue to face, communities continue to face, is the lack of respect for the time, and that stipends are missing. So we can't ask, I cannot even share an opportunity with community without information about stipends. If I don't know the amount, and if I don't know the time commitment and the day, we cannot share that information, because we cannot wait, oh, we are working on it. How long does it take to work on $35, $50, $100, $200? Everyone else has done it. Metro has done it. Other cities are able to. Beaverton has done it for so long. Why isn't Washington County able to do it? There's something is missing, that for 3 years we've had an office, we've been talking about it, but it continues to get invisibilized, and only when community leaders ask for it, then something is spoken about it. But we don't see intentional outreach by the DEI office or the county to address it, that this is a priority. We want civic leaders engaged. We are going to make this happen.
So yes, there is always more work to do. In terms of our civic leader program, we actually have had 120 people complete the program over the course of the last 6 years. And yes, Sushmita was part of the first. For folks that may not know, Sushmita and Blake were both part of the first cohort of civic leaders, and we have learned a lot along that way. And certainly there are some of the things that came out of that first cohort in evaluations and subsequent evaluations with participants, we have been able to address. We do have quite a few people that serve on boards and commissions in Washington County, and then in other jurisdictions as well. And then a few folks have gone on to run for elected office, or currently serve in elected office in some of the special districts in the county. So always room for improvement, and we're constantly learning. You know, as Latricia stated, we're just beginning this journey. We certainly have not achieved all the things we're setting out to achieve. We're just starting to scratch the surface.
All right, Madam.
Some of the other areas that you,
Madam Chair? Chair Lockwood?
Go ahead, please.
I guess a point of personal privilege is we're running at 8 o'clock, and I could use a break.
Sure.
That's good.
All right. Yes, this is about the time when we take a break. So is there any objection to breaking now for 5 minutes? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned for 5 minutes. Welcome back. If you are back, please turn on your camera so we know you're here. And since it's a work session, Mr. Bovet, I don't think I need a roll call at this point.
No, Madam Chair, you don't.
Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and start. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. So moving on into the Committee for Community Involvement and the Community Participation Organizations. I'm guessing that folks might be familiar with this, this program, the CCI we call it, and the CPO program, as this is the way in which the county complies with the DLCD Goal 1, which is about public engagement in relation to land use planning. So this CPO program has a long history in Washington County, and the Committee for Community Involvement is really an umbrella committee for the CPO program. Both of these are volunteer-led efforts, and so the Committee for Community Involvement is a volunteer-led committee that comprises of community participation organization leaders from the various active community participation organizations in the county. And so these is not a committee that is appointed by the board. They are volunteers, and they work to really try to ensure that that community has an opportunity to be aware of land use planning that's happening and decisions related to that. So the CPO program has been in the county for nearly 4 decades. It is ripe and ready for modernizing. It has not been updated really in that time. It had a transition period in a few years ago when it had been under the coordination of the OSU Extension Services, and it came under the county organization. But we are currently involved in a re-envisioning effort. So this is an opportunity to really look at the boundaries of the CPO program and how the structure of the CPO program, and then ways in which we can make it align with the county's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and really think through what is the best way to ensure that this program is serving the entire county, because it has fairly limited participation currently. And then we also provide technical assistance and guidance to departments across the organization as needed to support equitable community engagement. The county has 15 departments, and not all of them have staff that work whose role is specific to engaging with community. And so we help departments think through, what are they trying to do, and how can we help them think through a plan, or connect them with community-based organizations, or whatever that might look like to support their efforts in engaging with community. We also have staff in our office that work specifically with housing and the supportive housing services. And so really looking at engagement around addressing housing needs and houselessness in Washington. So next slide. Okay, so diving more specifically into boards and commissions. As I mentioned, we have the Equity Leadership Council Committee for Diversity and Inclusion in Boards and Commissions, and that staff committee is really looking at 3 main components around boards and commissions related to diversity and inclusion. So they're looking at recruitment and retention, onboarding, and training and bylaws. And so some of the things that we started doing a few years ago is looking more at the demographics of applicants and employees to the county's 36 advisory boards and commissions, and to see how some of those demographics, the information that we collect is race and ethnicity identification, as well as age and gender. And we started looking at how do the demographics of the people applying for boards and commissions and being appointed to boards and commissions compare in relation to county's demographics as a whole. When we first started looking at this information, we realized that only about 13% of applicants were providing their demographic, were answering the demographic questions that we have on the application. And so the first effort was really to elevate that need, and the board did a great job of doing that. The county commissioners really began talking about the value and importance of having that information. And our hope is to be able to use that information to really look at gaps in representation and focus recruitment efforts in relation to what committees are not being represented on the county's boards and commissions. So now we tend to hover at about 80% of applicants provide that information, which is great for us to be able to start really looking at that and then thinking about our connections in the community to really encourage people to apply for boards and commissions. So going to your recruitment question, one of the things that we in OEICE do is really we work with the boards and commissions liaison. So these are staff that support each of the county's boards and commissions to think about in what ways are those specific boards and commissions thinking about recruitment, and then what are the ways in which we in OEICE and then also in our communications team can really think about how are we reaching people and what are we letting them know. So the county has 4 different times of in the year. The Board of Commissioners does a vacancy announcement, and so we let them know what boards and commissions have current vacancies or upcoming vacancies, and then they make that announcement at a board meeting, do media release. And then we share that effort through our Community Engagement Connections, which is a weekly e-update that we send out to about 620 contacts in the county, and that communication is primarily focused on community-based organizations. And so it's not really, we don't really market it, if you will. It's pretty informal. We don't really market it to general community members. It's really geared towards community-based organizations, and so that they can have a weekly digest of engagement opportunities to share with their constituents, and then they send opportunities to us. We put them in there so that ideally folks across the county are seeing each other's opportunities and ours as well. And so that's one way that we share the boards and commissions opportunities, vacancies, and then we also work within our specific community relationship networks, and we look to boards and commissions to work within their networks. So we certainly have connections with culturally specific and responsive organizations and communities in the county. We do share opportunities with them. We share opportunities specific with civic leaders. We collect information from civic leader alum about what boards and commissions they might be interested in, and then we let them know when there are vacancies in some of those opportunities. And
I have a question, excuse me. Do you report this information anywhere about the makeup of boards and commissions? You do?
We do. So annually, so the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement does quarterly updates to the board on the work that we're doing. Annually, we share the boards and commissions data in that quarterly report. So the 4th quarter of every year, we share the demographic data. And we just do a year-to-year comparison because we're really interested in, how are we doing in relation? Are we continuing to see diversity of boards and commissions increase? And we are seeing that. We continue to see that each year since we've been looking at that data.
And so that would be on your webpage, is that right?
is it on, Mr. Latricia saying yes? Yes, it's on our webpage, and it's also going to say that it's in the on our boards and on our Board of County Commissioners page as well.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
Thank you
for our quarterly updates. We just did one in January.
Thanks.
Would you happen to have that information handy so that we could see a visual representation of this?
Let's see.
I can pull it up, Amanda, while you continue, and then I can share my screen.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And nice, Sushmita, I see another hand.
Yeah, thank you. Amanda, I have another question. If we are saying that we need, for example, 9 diverse voices, one, abilities and disabilities are never taken into consideration in representation. If we continue to fill the seats with what is available versus what should be there, we're never going to see representation. So what are we doing to ensure that we keep the seats empty? That means that acts as a motivation that we don't have the people who are supposed to be in there occupying those seats. So, but if we keep filling the seats across the board with, oh, we didn't get any applicants. Why didn't we get any applicants? Because it's not practical for them to be serving on these committees and spending 10 hours a month serving on the Land Use Commission or any commission for that matter. They can't afford to. They are not able to. There may be language barriers. Again, we completely fail to address the issue that immigrant refugee communities or migrant communities have had historically bad relationship with their governments, which is why they are here in the first place, due to safety or economic reasons. Otherwise, nobody wants to leave their home country and move over here. So if government is not something that they engage with, why would they want to serve on that committee or any committee? That means we have not done an adequate job in community outreach. And so it's almost like we keep filling the seats with what's available without being intentional about, no, let that be a reminder that we don't have what we need over there. And that, because that changes the mindset of I'm talking across all 36 committees, because I went to last year's volunteer dinner and I know that I was the one handful of people who were a person of color over there. Handful.
Ms. Tillman. You're muted.
I was gonna pull up my screen to show the diversity within our boards and commissions, if you're ready for that. But Amanda, do you want to respond to Commissioner Podar's comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yes, Sushmita, that is one of the reasons why we're looking at the gaps in demographic representation and looking to be more intentional about identifying communities to connect with, so that we can support increasing the diversity. In terms of barriers to participation, we, for some boards and commissions, stipends are being offered. For the Advisory Council on Racial Equity, which is a board and an advisory council to the board that I'm the liaison with, we do offer stipends for participation, and we're not alone in that. There are boards and commissions in the county that are doing that ever since the adoption of that policy. And so while once we have the procedures developed, this will help have a little more standardization across the county. Those things are possible. We do know that those are the ways to help people participate, and we do know that we're not reaching all of the communities that we like to. And so, certainly lots more work to do there, but that is one of the reasons why we started looking at the data and encouraging people to share that information with us, how they identify, so that we can be thinking about that.
Ms. Garcia, now I just wanted to make sure I heard you say there are some positions that are compensated. Is that right?
So just to clarify, we don't use the word compensation, but yes, we offer stipends and honorariums. Once that policy, the Equitable Community Engagement Policy, was passed by the board in in the fall, then that made that more of a clear county practice. The how-tos of that are still fairly nuanced because we are a bureaucratic organization, so it takes a little while to figure those things out, and we are in the process of doing that. But there are departments in the county that had been providing support to participate in that way before that policy was passed, and we've been doing it in the Advisory Council of Racial Equity as well. There are workarounds to making it happen.
Okay. Ms. Tillman, did you want to comment on that topic?
No, I was hoping to share my screen, but it doesn't look like I have permission to share my screen. I could also put a link in the chat, but I'm not seeing a chat either.
I think we can pause on that until we kind of clear this topic up.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead, and since Commissioner Havener has not spoken on this, I'm going to call on you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm unsure how a stipend creates equity if it's offered to all of the members.
So the way that we think about it is thinking about the traditional barriers to participation that historically excluded communities have experienced and other people experience as well. And that is what the intent of the stipend is, to offset that. So a few of those things are childcare, transportation costs for in-person meetings when that was happening more frequently. There's also an emotional labor associated with sharing your lived experience for communities of color. That's, that can be a re-traumatizing experience for people. It can be all kinds of things for people. And so we just really want to honor that. And that is what some of that, the ways in which we think about the stipends.
But isn't equity about creating
not everyone, it's available to anyone. Not everyone asks for it.
Okay. And then can you define for me what the first bullet there reflect the community? As a leader at Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue for many years, we said the same thing. What does reflect the community mean? Does that mean that we should have 50% female firefighters and certain percentages of people of color? Or does it actually mean that we're going to reflect our community and what's the demographics of the community that we serve?
So when we use this phrase, we're really referring to racial ethnic identity. And then we also look at age and for adults. So obviously we're not going to reflect the entire spectrum of age in the county's population. And then we also, we look at gender identity as well.
So my question is, what does reflect mean? Does it mimic percentages of demographics, or does it just make sure that we have an adequate representation of each people group?
So I think ideally it would mimic those demographics. That's not what we currently see.
So so then your ideal board or commission would be 50% female, certain percentage Latin, Latino, certain percentage of other peoples of color, correct? That mimics the demographic of the community.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just caught up on the 50% female because I was thinking about gender identity, but yes, I mean, what you're saying is not necessarily that exact numbers, but in the same way that you're saying it, that it would mimic the demographics of the adult population.
Commissioner Podar has had her hand up, and then after her,
I'll defer to Commissioner.
All right,
Commissioner. Thank you,
Commissioner Milliman.
I actually, if it's all right, I'd like to respond to Commissioner Havener, and I think your point was good and very well made. I perceive a difference between the two roles in that governing or representing people doesn't have that physical component. And so, I mean, firefighting, there's lifting, there's a lot of rescue activities. If you can't do that, you can't be a fire person. Like, there's just a qualification there or limitation that I don't think applies necessarily to civic representation. And so I see your point, and I think it's good. And I don't think we can treat firefighting like we treat city government. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Oh, but it does, because I can have EMS
yes.
provider, fire inspectors, code enforcement personnel, staff in my administration building, that all of those represent the community. It's not just the definition. And you're exactly right. You still have to be able to do the job. So even when we look at a county board or commission, you have to be able to do the job as well as represent a people group.
Yes, agreed. I think we're agreeing. I think they're different. And I think there's a place for folks with different abilities and different qualities to represent that similar. And I think they're very able. So yeah, I like having that conversation and thinking about it because it's nuance, and I don't think we can treat everything the same way.
Commissioner Podar.
Thank you. I am glad we are finally having conversation around what is diversity, and does it reflect exact percentages, or does it reflect the general idea of gender identities? Does it reflect different diverse communities? I'm going to give you a simple example. Asian Pacific Islanders comprise of 69% of the world's population. 69% of the population. Does that mean that it is 69% of the diversity of the world? No, it's not, because there are only 67 some countries, but there is another 100 and something other countries elsewhere. But can one Asia represents Palestine all the way to Japan. Pacific Islanders are also Guam and Hawaii. Guam and Hawaii both are they are colonized land of United States. So that comes under Pacific Islander identity. Pacific Islanders, a lot of them that are US territories, do not get a chance to vote. Do I somebody whose ancestry is from South Asia, know anything about Hawaiians? No, I don't. So we will probably need Pacific Islander. No, we definitely need Pacific Islander representation. Can I represent all of Asia? No, I can't, but I can do my darnest best to do it. Can Latinx community members, South American and Mexican, completely different identities. So how do we make sure that the diversity of the community is represented? How many more Asians do suppose this was a land use commission and there were 7 Asian community members. How many more Asian community members do we need to represent the Asian identity while we're missing everybody else out? So different identities, race, ethnic, gender, abilities, disability identities, we want to get as much representation as possible across the board, especially in decision-making capacity. Because we know that, again, if we say that the ability, who is going to decide that somebody is able to do a job or not? If historically they have always been kept away from positions of power, who's going to decide that somebody is able to do a job or not? Sometimes people will have to learn on the job. And that is why you create a village that will support somebody who may not be the absolute best capable person of doing that job, but there will be a whole village of people supporting that office. No person, a good leader is never one individual. A good leader is a community, and they are representing, they're stepping back and deciding strategies to ensure that communities are able to step up to the mark. At any given point of time, a leader should be replaceable because they've created multiple leaders around them. So hopefully that talks about diversity. Again, when we spoke about stipends, Amanda, would you be able to, just for knowledge for everybody else, would you be able to tell people what the stipend for the Racial Equity Committee is, so that people understand what stipends look like?
You're asking the hard question, Sushmita. So that committee meets monthly for 2 hours at a time. And I want to say that we, that it's $100 per meeting, might be $80 per meeting.
It's about, I think it's 35 and 35. I think it's about $70 per meeting, if I'm not wrong. And that came by advocacy. When that committee was formed, there was no stipends involved. So we advocated for the stipends, otherwise we wouldn't share that information out. So then later on, before the committee was formed, the stipends were, so thank you, Latricia, for that at least, that we made sure that that committee, we are like, that's an equity committee. Why isn't it stipended? First, let's begin from there and make sure everybody else has access as well. This is not a payment for their time, because what people bring to this table is a whole lot of lived experience that if we hired a consultant to actually come and represent 9 of us, the county would be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring in the information that we are sharing. So a stipend is just a mark of respect for the time that you're spending on the committee. That could be that you have to look for childcare. That could be that you could have spent that time going out and being with your family. That could have been a time that you had spent studying or relaxing. But that also does not honor all of the stuff, all of the knowledge that we bring from the community that we have spent learning about our communities. So it doesn't compensate for anything. $35, $50, $100, but it's a small token of appreciation. Thank you for helping us, the county, do their work better in an equitable manner. So that's just a little compensation. So, but it is an important thing. Again, not everybody needs a stipend, but when we say that not everybody wants it, we are working with inequity. Every single person, if equality is our goal, then every single person will get the stipend, period. What they want to do with that stipend, they want to pass it on to somebody else, share it with somebody else, up to them. But when we say that, do you want it? We create a situation of begging. I need it, so I want it. No, everybody is going to get it. Yes, some people are going to disproportionately benefit from it. Some people need it. Some people will benefit from it. It's part of humanity. So, but I would love to also know what is the timeline like. When are we going to expect? It's been 3 years. We've gone round and round in circles about this. I think it's time that we made sure that there is a timeline and that we can have county commit to that timeline at some point. Maybe not this meeting, but next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I was starting to get a little uncomfortable, not with the content that you've been saying, just that we may be straying from the business of the Planning Commission here a little bit. You know, advocacy for around stipends, but I think was Commissioner Milliman first and then Commissioner Havener. Look at the other way. Yeah, let's go ahead with Commissioner Havener.
So I want to go back to Sashmita's comment about people that are appointed to boards or commissions. You know, on this board, we only have nine positions. I think in the Beaverton School District alone, there's over 80 languages spoken as a first language. So, you know, part of our appointment, which is recognition of thank you for doing this work, our appointment to this commission, also is to represent the people in our region. So like we've talked about before, we have to get out there and make sure that we have the Pacific Islanders or the Asians, or make sure that we know what their position is, because we're their representative for a geographic area. We can't appoint them all to the board. And I'll go back. I've served as a volunteer in the fire service many, many years ago. It was my honor to serve as a volunteer. I didn't require a stipend to make sure that I did the work that represented my community and provided a quality service to the community. So I think if you're going to offer stipends, and I apologize, Chair, about there, but I had to make the comment. If we're going to make the stipend available to everybody, that's equality. That's not equity. That's it.
Commissioner Milliman.
I just wanted to qualify my previous statement in that physical and other jobs with kind of a special or specialty requirement I think if you meet that requirement, that it's important that there isn't harassment and that you have the restroom facilities that make you comfortable. And I think we all agree, but I think that's where we're looking for equity, equality, because yeah, there are some qualifications that not everyone can meet, but I don't know that I think government is one of them. And I like your thinking. I appreciate what you bring to the conversation.
I do just want to clarify that, and to maybe, I don't know, close this portion of the conversation out, but the passage of the policy, when the board adopted the policy, the equitable community engagement policy last fall, that made it possible for all boards and commissions that can provide stipends and honorary, make that opportunity available to their members. In some instances, that was already happening in the county in some departments. The caveat to that is that not all of the county's advisory boards and commissions are only governed by bylaws. Some of them are governed by statute, state statute, and other authorities. And so I know that the Planning Commission is one of those, and I think that that does create some more nuanced conversation. And so I am certainly not the authority on that, but I do just want to say that it didn't necessarily equate to every board and commission being able to have that opportunity. I feel like maybe the Assessment and Taxation Board of Property Tax Appeals also is not able to receive stipends, but I'm not positive. And I think there's just a little more legal consideration for some boards and commissions. And I think those conversations are still happening.
Mr. Milliman.
Okay, last thing, I just want to say, I think it's great that everyone is offered a stipend, because I think the purpose is to reduce, ideally eliminate barriers. So if that's something that prevents you from participating, I don't need to know. If you can be a better, if you're able to participate or be on the commission because we offered you a stipend, great. And I think that having that be available for everyone, if you don't need it, do something good with it. Like, I think it's awesome that anybody can have that stipend and that we make it available.
Okay, so next slide. And I think this is my last slide. So in addition to diversity, we also focus on inclusion. And this looks at a variety of different ways to support inclusion. Some of that is around inclusive environments and more welcoming spaces. So we provide some basic equity, diversity, and inclusion training. The harassment policy that Latricia mentioned earlier is one that we want to make sure all boards and commissions and volunteers in the county know that this harassment-free workplace policy applies to them as well, even though they're not employees, because not everyone's aware of that. And so we do provide some basic training, and then when we can, we bring in more in-depth EDI training and make those available to boards and commission members as well. That Equity Leadership Council Committee that I mentioned earlier is working on recommendations for consistent training practices across boards and commissions to support this focus area. It's also working on more inclusive examples of bylaws language. So as I mentioned, not all boards and commissions are able to propose bylaws changes to the board. Some of them are governed by state statute that has limitations, but for those that can, we are working on sample language that's more inclusive to be included in bylaws. And some boards and commissions have been doing that for years, like the Public Health Advisory Board, and for many others, this is a newer practice. And then we're also thinking through onboarding and orientation. So especially for more technical committees, thinking about internship and office hours and all manner of strategies to really make space for people who may not be as familiar with technical information or may not be as familiar with participating in a board commission, and make space for them to get the support that they need so that they can feel comfortable participating and they can feel ready for that opportunity. And then, of course, language accessibility and accessibility are paramount to participation. And so we continue to work on those things as well. As Latricia and others have mentioned, and myself included, there is a lot of work to do in Washington County there, and that's one of the things that keeps me coming back day after day for the last 15 years, because we're not even close to finished. And so there is always room for improvement, and we are just starting to scratch the surface in all things equity centered in our practice. So next slide. And we are to questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Are there more questions or comments?
I just had a curiosity question. And do you have, maybe I missed it, but which, like how many boards are offering versus not? I know that some can't statutorily, but of the ones that can, how many and what's the percentage of the ones that are versus are not?
So Blake, I don't know. I don't know which boards aren't able to do that, or which boards have to do a little more figuring or conversation with county council to determine if that's possible to offer stipends and honorariums for their boards and commissions. But the majority of the county's boards and commissions are not governed by statute. In terms of which ones have members that are receiving those stipends and honorariums, I don't know how many. I mean, I know off the top of my head, I can think of 3 that are. One is four that are. One is a public health advisory board that was doing it long before the policy. Health and Human Services had their own policy around participation support, and they've had that in place for at least 5 years, I think. And so their boards and commissions that aren't governed by statute, I think they were making that available. But I can't say for sure.
And I can jump in just to clarify a little bit too. We do have some community development code language around the Planning Commission that could be somewhat challenging. And so this is something that we are having a conversation with Rob Bovet about, and then may need to bring it back for further discussion. But it is something that we're working with Rob on, and we've talked to Amanda and Latricia about this a little bit as well. In addition to having the policy in place and eventually getting the procedure in place, hopefully soon, so that we know what procedures to follow, there's a bureaucratic layer of this in terms of the paperwork. Amanda didn't talk about the paperwork that's necessary to provide the stipend to the ACRE participants, but we talked about that at our last meeting. It's a little bit onerous. And then there's a budget challenge with this, because if departments don't have budget authorized for this purpose, that's something they would need to allocate as well. So there are some various pieces that we would need to figure out. Just a little bit more work to be done on that.
Ms. Tillman.
Yeah, just to add that the good news is that Washington County is not out in the front on this. We are also looking at state agencies that have been working on this policy. There's, my understanding, a legislative concept or bill now to update Goal 1 with an equity lens. So ideally, we're not doing this work out of alignment with the state and with other jurisdictions as well. So I think what might have been perceived as challenging in the past, we can now look to other jurisdictions and our state partners for how to make this happen.
That makes sense to me, that there'd be a broader discussion. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Thank you both very much for that presentation. Oh, Commissioner Potter.
Thank you, Latricia and Amanda, for being here, for sharing. I would like to encourage that while a county and DEI office is focused on internal county work, if we are not, community cannot wait anymore. It's not about that there's an urgency. The fact is that we are lagging behind, way behind, and it's a disservice to community if all of the effort, the community's tax money, hard-earned money, is paying everybody's salaries at the county. And so if the people who are paying that money are not getting addressed, and their needs and wants and their are not being addressed and met at an equal pace for the people that they're paying for, it's again inequity. So how do we make sure that while we are doing whatever needs to be done in the county, but at an equal pace, community is constantly being addressed, and there is transparency, and that I don't have to jump through, as a community member, jump through loopholes to get information, to address needs, wants, desires, whatever that is. Because the disconnect between community and government is right there, that community doesn't know that they are the boss. So if we are not going to make them feel that way, that they are the shapers of their own destinies, and that their needs and wants are front and center of everything else, I don't see big changes happening. So how do we make sure that, because I can't, as civic leader, I cannot encourage diverse community members to be part of this, because I know that this is exploitative labor. That's what we are doing. It's not volunteer work. We have to use the right words. It's exploitative labor, because some people in this room are getting paid for the expert advice, for the work that they're doing. Others are not. So I cannot, in my right conscience, encourage other community members to offer that labor without making sure that at least they have some recognition of what they are doing, and that the county is focused on that. So yes, you both are doing wonderful work. Yes, the work is challenging. We are right alongside each other, right? I'm a civic leader. I'm volunteering all this time. So we are right there with each other. I know Blake is, I know others, other community. You have 120 of us now. So how do you use all of us to make sure that we are able to create the space that's truly welcoming for all of us? Then thank you.
Any other comments? Well, again, thank you very much for that presentation. And we will, I'm sure, be hearing more and thinking more about this. Our next item is consideration of minutes for March 15th, 2023. Does anyone have any corrections to offer for these minutes? Okay. Is there any objection to approving the minutes as submitted? All right, seeing none, the minutes are approved. Next item is Planning Commission announcements. Does any commissioner have something they want to share with us? I'm not seeing any hand up. Next item is adjournment. Is there any objection to adjourning at this time? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.